If you are listening to this right now, there is a very good chance you are currently dealing with the absolute joy of earthly transportation.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, maybe you were stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, right? Staring at that endless sea of red taillights, just tapping your steering wheel.
Or perhaps you were, packed onto a crowded commuter train, desperately trying to maintain your balance while actively avoiding eye contact with a person who is practically standing on your shoes.
Yeah, exactly. And someone probably just cut you off, or the train is delayed for like the third time this week, and you were sitting there thinking, I just want to get far, far away from all of this.
As far as humanly possible.
Right. Well, today we are going to take you on the ultimate road trip. And when I say ultimate, I mean leaving the planet entirely.
Yeah, trading the congestion of the morning commute for the absolute pristine vacuum of deep space.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have been poring over a massive stack of recent sources, articles, and flight data detailing the historic 10-day Artemis II mission.
It really is a massive amount of data.
It is. And our mission today is to extract the most thrilling technological achievements, the surprising human elements, and what this momentous 53-year-in-the-making flyby of the moon actually means for the future of space exploration.
It truly is a watershed moment.
Yeah.
We are analyzing a mission that shattered records and, literally laid the engineering foundation for humanity's next chapter in the solar system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the wild details of how this crew survived a fiery return to Earth, we have to look at the monumental launch itself.
Right.
And the pioneers who broke a half-century drought of deep space travel. Because we haven't seen a deep space human flight like this since Apollo 17 back in 1972.
Which is staggering to think about.
Yeah.
An entire generation has grown up, lived, and had children of their own without ever seeing human beings leave low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
We're so used to LEO missions, like the ISS, sitting just 400 kilometers up. So to suddenly shoot humans out hundreds of thousands of kilometers into the void, that requires an entirely different discipline of orbital mechanics and vehicle engineering.
Artemis II totally flipped the script on April 2, 2026. The massive space launch system, the SLS rocket, roared to life at Kennedy Space Center's Pad 39B.
A truly massive machine.
Unbelievable scale. That rocket pushed 4 Pioneers to an astonishing distance of over 406,771 kilometers away from Earth. I mean, if going to the ISS is like driving down the block to the corner grocery store, Artemis II was a cross-country off-road expedition into the absolute wilderness.
That's a great way to put it.
And the crew making this historic expedition reflects a really beautiful shift in who gets to go into that wilderness. We had Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialist Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen.
What's fascinating here is the history embedded just in that crew roster.
Oh, absolutely.
The Apollo missions were exclusively comprised of American men. Artemis II represented a much more global, inclusive vision of space exploration by sending the first woman, Christina Koch, and the first non-American, the Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, out to the moon.
But looking at their flight plan, I have a technical question that I think a lot of people, including you listening, were wondering about.
Okay.
They went all that way, over 400,000 kilometers, but they utilized what's called a free return trajectory. They just slingshotted around the moon instead of actually inserting themselves into orbit around it. If you travel that far, why not hit the brakes and look around for a few days?
Well, that is a fundamental engineering trade-off. The free return trajectory is essentially a brilliant orbital safety net.
A safety net.
Yes. When the SLS rocket pushed them toward the moon, they executed one major engine burn to aim for a very specific, mathematically perfect point in space, about 6,545 kilometers from the lunar surface.
Wait, so they aim for a patch of empty space, not the moon itself?
Precisely. By hitting that exact window, they allow the moon's gravity to catch the Orion spacecraft and naturally swing it right back toward Earth.
Oh, wow.
Think of it as using a planet's gravity like a pendulum. They didn't need to rely on another massive critical engine burn to break out of lunar orbit and get home.
So it's foolproof.
Essentially. If the main engines had completely failed after that initial push toward the moon, the physics of the universe would have brought them back anyway.
Ah, so it's like throwing a boomerang around a gravitational pole. You don't need a motor on the boomerang to get it back. You just need to throw it at the exact right angle.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. And remember, the primary goal of Artemis II, this wasn't a landing mission. This was a critical test bed.
Right?
It was the very first time the Orion spacecraft's life support systems were tested in the harsh environment of deep space with actual humans on board, breathing the air, drinking the water, and generating heat. You want the ultimate safety net when you are testing breathing systems hundreds of thousands of kilometers from any possible rescue.
That makes total sense. Because they didn't have to worry about complex orbital insertion burns, they had plenty of time to focus on that life support testing and to do some incredible things while dealing with some very human problem.
Oh, they were remarkably busy during that transit. Before the mission, NASA actually sent the crew to train in the volcanic fields of Iceland.
Iceland. Why there?
The basalts and geological formations there are an excellent analog for the lunar surface. So as they flew past the moon, they put that training to use, conducting vital geological observations of the Orion Basin, which sits right on the edge of the moon's near and far sides.
Seeing the far side of the moon with human eyes, I mean, that alone gives me chills. But reading through the flight logs, the thing that really struck me was the emotional weight of what they did out there. They discovered and named 2 new craters.
Yes, the naming convention carried a lot of weight. They named one crater Integrity, which was a nod to the mission itself. Specifically, the name the crew gave to the spacecraft's heat shield. But the second crater naming was profoundly personal.
Yeah. They named a crater Carroll after Commander Reed Wiseman's late wife, who passed away from cancer in 2020. I mean, just put yourself in Commander Wiseman's shoes.
It's hard to even imagine.
You are further from home than almost anyone in human history, looking down at this ancient, untouched landscape, and you leave your wife's name etched into the map of the cosmos forever.
It is a stark reminder that we don't just send machines into space, right? We send human beings with histories, grief, and love. It connects the vast, cold emptiness of space back to the very beating heart of why we explore in the first place.
Beautifully said. And they had some incredibly surreal experiences to match that emotional high. They actually caught a short solar eclipse, but from the perspective of being inside the moon's shadow looking back at Earth.
A completely reversed perspective.
Yeah. They even managed a crystal clear long-distance phone call with the crew aboard the International Space Station. Just 2 tiny groups of humans hanging out in the cosmic void, catching up.
Which really highlights how robust our deep space communication networks have become.
Oh.
However, not all the onboard technology operated as flawlessly as the comms array.
Okay, I'm so glad we were bringing this up. We have to talk about the plumbing.
We do.
I was reading the post-flight reports, and I find myself laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all.
Oh.
We can perfectly calculate a gravitational slingshot to a 6,000-kilometer window in the dark, but we still cannot build a clog-free toilet.
Space plumbing is the great equalizer of human exploration. During the 10-day mission, the toilet inside the Orion capsule clogged frequently.
I just don't get it. Why is a toilet so hard to engineer?
Because gravity does a massive amount of invisible work for us on Earth. When you flush a toilet here, gravity pulls the fluid and waste down.
Right.
But in microgravity, fluids don't fall, they cling. Surface tension takes over. Water forms these sticky spheres that attach to the sides of pipes. To counteract this, space toilets use targeted airflow to pull waste away.
Like a vacuum.
Sort of, yes.
Hmm.
But calculating the exact airflow needed when dealing with mixed phases of matter, liquids, solids, and gases all behaving unpredictably without gravity, is an engineering nightmare.
Wow, so they were basically testing version 1.0 of the modern deep space bathroom. But I saw some analysts calling this plumbing failure a success. Explain that logic to me.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, finding this flaw now is a massive victory. During Apollo, astronauts essentially used a rudimentary system of plastic bags and hoses, which was notoriously uncomfortable.
That's off.
It was. Artemis II represents the first time a fully integrated, modern sanitation system was installed for a lunar mission. Discovering that the airflow system clogs now, during a 10-day flyby, is exactly what NASA needed. You absolutely do not want to discover a fatal flaw in your sanitation system when you have astronauts living in a permanent lunar base for 6 months.
Yeah. Better to bring out the cosmic plunger on a quick flyby than halfway to Mars. I can see the logic. But finding a plumbing flaw is a relief. There was one system where failure meant immediate catastrophe. Getting back through Earth's atmosphere alive was the true final exam of this mission.
The reentry and splashdown, the physics involved here are just staggering.
Yeah, on April 10th or 11th, depending on your time zone, touching down at 7:07 a.m. Thai time, the capsule splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. But to get to that gentle splash, they had to go through hell. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because they were returning from deep space, not just low Earth orbit, they hit our atmosphere at Mach 32.
Which is roughly 39,693 kilometers per hour.
Mind-blowing speed.
It is. And when you are traveling that fast, you are carrying an immense amount of kinetic energy. As the capsule hits the friction of Earth's atmosphere, that kinetic energy violently converts into heat. The Orion capsule was engulfed in a plasma wake reaching 2,800 degrees Celsius, or about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which brings us to the integrity heat shield. And this is where I have to push back a little on NASA's decision-making. I was looking at the logs from the uncrewed Artemis I mission in 2022.
Okay.
During that test, the heat shield took unexpected damage, right? It lost more material than projected. Instead of building a completely new, stronger shield for the human crew on Artemis II, NASA kept the same design but decided to drive the spaceship in at a steeper angle. Wait, if you dive into a pool steep, you hit harder. Are they just risking the crew's physical safety to avoid rebuilding a shield?
Well, that's a very natural concern, and it sounds counterintuitive at first, but this is where the sheer genius of aerospace engineering comes into play. To understand NASA's confidence, you have to look at the concept of heat soak.
Heat soak, what is that?
Yes. The heat shield is 16.5 feet across, the largest of its kind ever flown. Redesigning it would have set the program back years. But NASA engineers realized the hardware wasn't inherently flawed. The issue is actually the duration of the heat exposure.
Oh, the time spent in the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By altering the trajectory to come in at a steeper angle, they deliberately subjected the capsule to a higher peak temperature, but for a much shorter total duration. They reduced the amount of time the heat had to soak through the outer layers and reach the cabin.
Okay, so a hotter fire, but you pull your hand out of it much faster.
Precisely.
But that still leaves the physical impact you mentioned. How does the ship not just shatter from hitting the atmosphere that hard? Walk us through the shield's architecture, because 2,800 degrees is the melting point for most metals.
The shield relies on an incredible three-layer architecture. Layer 1 is the ablative layer. This is the outermost skin, made of a special epoxy novolac resin called Avcoat. It is designed to literally burn and flake away as it heats up.
So it sacrifices itself, like how human sweat evaporates to cool you down.
That is a perfect analogy. As the resin burns and physically flakes off into the plasma wake, it carries the thermal energy away from the spacecraft. But what makes this Avcoat special is that they mix in silica fibers and microscopic phenolic balloons.
Wait, balloons. How does a microscopic hollow sphere stop 5,000-degree plasma?
Because heat struggles to travel through empty space.
Oh, right.
By packing the resin with millions of incredibly tiny hollow spheres, you create microscopic pockets of vacuum within the material. This makes the layer exceptionally lightweight while providing massive thermal insulation, preventing the heat from rapidly transferring inward.
All right, so the outer layer is sweating off the heat and using microvacuums to slow it down. But if it's burning away, what stops the plasma from melting the next layer?
That brings us to layer 2, which is the composite skin. Once you get past the burning ablative layer, you need immense structural strength that won't warp under high temperatures. They use carbon fiber mixed with a highly advanced material called cyanate ester.
Why not just use, I don't know, thick steel or iron?
Weight is the enemy of spaceflight. Every extra pound costs tens of thousands of dollars in rocket fuel to launch. Cyanate ester composites offer extreme thermal stability, meaning they don't expand or warp when heated while remaining incredibly lightweight. It acts as the lightweight armor behind the burning skin.
That is wild. And what about that belly flop impact?
That is handled by layer 3, the skeleton. Underneath the armor is a massive titanium truss. Titanium is incredibly strong. When you hit the atmosphere at Mach 32, the aerodynamic shear forces are trying to physically tear the spacecraft apart. The titanium skeleton absorbs all that kinetic shock, protecting the crew inside from the physical violence of the deceleration.
So sweating ablative skin, lightweight composite armor, and unbreakable titanium bones. And this strategy, the steeper angle to reduce heat soak, combined with these 3 layers, it actually worked.
It was a resounding success. When Commander Wiseman and the crew performed their initial post-splashdown checks, they reported the underside of the capsule looked fantastic. There was only minor, totally expected burnt flaking around the shoulder of the capsule. The crew reported the ride down was incredibly smooth.
Mach 32 into a ball of plasma, and they call it a smooth ride. Astronauts are just built differently, I swear.
I certainly are.
But, you know, we've talked about the launch, the slingshot, the craters, the plumbing, and this incredible fiery return. The tech is proven, the crew is safe. So what does this all actually mean? What is the ultimate payoff of this multi-billion-dollar endeavor for humanity and, more importantly for you, listening right now?
This raises an important question because this mission wasn't the finale, it was the prologue. In fact, Artemis II was the final flight for this specific version of the heat shield design. The technology and emission parameters are about to radically shift.
We are officially watching the transition from just visiting space to moving into space.
Right. Exactly. The timeline is moving aggressively fast. Artemis III, slated for 2027, will test actual human landing systems built by commercial partners like SpaceX and Blue Origin. But Artemis IV in 2028 is the true game changer.
How so?
That is when NASA plans to land at the lunar South Pole and begin establishing a permanent long-term base.
I've seen a lot of focus on the lunar South Pole specifically in these reports. Why? It's just more rocks, isn't it?
It is about what is hidden in the shadows of those rocks. Water ice.
Ah.
Finding water ice in the permanently shadowed craters of the South Pole changes the entire math of space exploration. You don't just drink that water. Through a process called electrolysis, using solar arrays to generate electricity, you can split that H2O into hydrogen and oxygen.
Wait, hydrogen and oxygen? That's literal rocket fuel.
Yes, escaping Earth's deep gravity will account for about 80% of the fuel cost of any deep space mission. If you can manufacture liquid hydrogen and oxygen propellants on the moon becomes a cosmic gas station.
That is brilliant.
It becomes the ultimate stepping stone, making a human mission to Mars highly achievable.
And we aren't doing this in a geopolitical vacuum either. We are looking at a brand new space race.
We absolutely are. China is actively planning to land their own astronauts on the moon by 2030, and they are developing their own permanent settlement, the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS. This international competition is driving rapid, unprecedented innovation to secure those vital lunar resources.
But for the person listening to this on their commute, who might never go to the moon, how does this affect them?
Well, the technology required to build a multiplanetary civilization doesn't just stay in space. The advancements in zero-waste water recycling required for life support will impact how we manage water in drought-stricken areas on Earth.
Right, that trickle-down tech.
Exactly. The extreme materials engineering, like those carbon fiber cyanate ester composites, will inevitably trickle down to create stronger, lighter, more fuel-efficient airplanes and electric vehicles. The investment in surviving the extremes of space pays continuous dividends in our everyday lives on Earth.
It is truly staggering to step back and look at the whole picture. Let's just take a breath and recap what we've covered today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We just witnessed a flawless 10-day mission that broke a 53-year drought of deep space human travel. We saw a crew of diverse pioneers slingshot around the moon, honoring lost loved ones by naming craters, and testing the literal limits of human endurance and microgravity plumbing.
Can't forget the plumbing.
Never. We saw a spacecraft hit the atmosphere at Mach 32, generating 2,800 degrees of heat, and protect its crew with a brilliantly engineered 3-layer shield. We are standing at the dawn of a completely new era.
The foundation has been laid. Artemis II proved the vehicle works, the math is sound, and the human spirit is willing. Now the real work of building a permanent presence in the solar system begins.
And that leaves us with something I really want you to ponder as you go about the rest of your day, maybe as you finally pull into your driveway and step off that train. If we are truly on track to have permanent human bases on the moon by 2028 and a fuel depot aiming for Mars shortly after, well, what does the concept of home mean for the next generation? Will you one day look up at the night sky, not just to see a lonely rock, but to see another bustling neighborhood?
A profound thought to carry with us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking up, stay insanely curious, and we will catch you next time.